Well, good evening, everyone, here at the library in Rockport, and also we've got some folks joining us on Zoom. Welcome. This Zoom meeting is being recorded in case there's other people who couldn't make it who want to find more information out that we talked about tonight. My name's Kristen Carlson. Louder. Okay. My name is Kristen Carlson, and I am the Director of Real Estate Development at Harbor Light Homes. I'm joined by my colleague Anna here, who is in charge of the lottery. I do a lot of the development work, financing, and construction. And then once it's built, it goes over to Anna. So I will tell you a little bit about the project just by way of introduction and about Harbor Light if you're not familiar with us. Right click. Sorry, that's okay. Go over here. Okay, there we go. There you go. Okay, thank you. All right. So who's Harbor Light? We are a nonprofit community development corporation. So we build and manage affordable housing all over the North Shore. That includes housing for seniors, for families, for disabled individuals, for homeless populations throughout Essex County. So really from Lynn all the way up to Cape Ann is kind of where we are. We advocate for just and equitable communities because we believe everyone deserves a home. We feel very strongly about that. So just as a snapshot, obviously we're here to talk about Granite Street Crossing, but we've got other things in development that you may be interested in. So current properties, those are properties that we own and operate. We have senior housing here in Rockport at the high school and at Pigeon Cove Ledges. And I see Don here in the back, also from Harbor Light. We have senior housing in Ipswich, in Beverly, and also in Saugus. We have supportive senior housing, and the difference there, what that means is that it's housing that has more intensive services paired with it, such as meals, such as healthcare support and things like that. So that's in Beverly and Peabody. We have family and individual housing scattered throughout the region. We also have some first-time homebuyer properties in Gloucester. So if you know where Caven Terrace is in Gloucester, so that's part of a land trust. Those have been in place for quite a while. We've got some new stuff coming up. We're working in Ipswich with the Ipswich Housing Authority to renovate their existing housing, Agawam Village. It'll really bring the units up to speed and be really nice when it's done. We're permitting a project in Hamilton called Asbury Common, which is 45 units. We're permitting that under the 40B program. Briscoe Village for Living in the Arts is in Beverly, and that is also affordable senior housing with 6 artist studios. That will be a mix of studios, 1-bedrooms, and I think a couple of 2-bedrooms for the senior housing. And that's about to start construction probably this month. So very exciting. Catalyst Housing is in downtown Lynn. That's going to be studios for homeless young adults age 18 to 24. Harborview Place is a project in Gloucester that we're going to start permitting. So it's a few years out. So if you haven't, if you're not familiar, these projects, I always say it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So what we see in development or coming up, it's still several years out, right? It could be 5 years away before it's ready to move into. But that will be senior housing in Gloucester, downtown. Maple Woods in Wenham, also senior. Those are 45 1-bedrooms, and that has just started construction. Windward Crossing in Rowley. So that will be a combination of senior housing and housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. And that's several years out. So we've got a lot lot coming up. So there's, you know, if you're thinking about different locations or things like that, just, we're still a few years out, but that's kind of what we have in our pipeline and what's coming up. Yeah.
So folks can see the edge of this.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, sorry, it's my fault for.
No.
Why don't we make that go away? Then why don't we go? Yeah. I want to try to make that. There we
There we
go. Is that better?
That's that.
There we go.
Okay. Thanks, Anna. And here's just, yeah, no, but we're here to talk about Granite Street Crossing tonight. So we have 23 affordable homes. These are income-based, affordability. We have 17 studio homes for seniors age 62 and over. We have 6 2- and 3-bedroom townhouses for families, households who need several bedrooms. We have accessible units. We have a unit for with sensory impairment function. Income levels go from 30% of AMI, which Anna will explain a little more, up to 60% of those, a range of incomes. Is it okay? Oh gosh, okay. Yep. Okay, so there'll be a range of income levels that Anna will explain in a little more detail. We accept any sort of mobile housing vouchers, and many of the units come with vouchers to supplement the rent to help the units be more affordable. Can you hear me? Okay. So as part of the lottery, we do have a local preference for folks in Rockport who live or work or have children attending public schools in Rockport for a portion of the units at lease up. So Anna will explain more about the logistics of that. We have a preference also for seniors who are eligible for supportive services. So this property, there'll be a service coordinator in addition to the property manager and the maintenance who will help with access to different services that are available. So we have some units that have a preference for homeless applicants. I think there's 3 of those in the project, and Anna will explain, but what preferences, well, she'll explain what preferences mean in terms of how the lottery works. Okay, so rent will include, there's free on-site parking, and it includes all the utilities. So that's heat, air conditioning, electricity, water, trash, everything is included in the rent. It's new construction. I think probably a lot of people have driven by the site. You've seen it coming up, and once they get framing, it really starts to look like something. So it's new construction. The laundry in the senior building has shared laundry on both floors 1 and 2. And then the townhouses have their own individual laundries in the units. The senior building has several community spaces. There's a library space. There's a larger community room. There's a multi-purpose space that will be for medical use or salon use. The heat and the AC is controlled by each unit. I know that can be important, so you don't have to like the same temperature as your neighbor, which is good. Closer to the family townhouses, sort of like more towards the back of the site, we have there's a playground back there, sort of a lawn space, and then we have raised bed gardens as well, community garden. Finishes, we've got tile bathrooms, vinyl plank floors, so it's not carpeted. Obviously everything is new. The kitchen is brand new. And obviously we all know where it is. But it's a great location right in downtown Rockport, walking to the commuter rail, walking to the downtown, walking to the beach. So it's a great central location. So here are some sample floor plans. These are the studios. So I had some questions about that earlier. And these are 355 square feet. So there's a full kitchen with a stove, oven, refrigerator, microwave, large closet. No dishwasher. No dishwasher. Large closet, a bathroom. All the bathrooms are fully accessible. So they are sort of walk in or roll in showers, large showers, with grab bars that they're all installed. So, and then a large living space. Here are the 2-bedroom townhouses. So the first floor has a fully accessible 2-bedroom, and then the second floor is up a flight of stairs. The senior building is 2 floors, but it has an elevator. And then the 3-bedroom unit, you can see with the living spaces on the first floor, and then the bedrooms and full bath above. So here's where I'm going to hand it over to Anna, but happy to answer questions at the end about the project in general.
Great, thank you. Notice she gives me the slide with all the numbers. I see what she did there. I see what she did. I do love the numbers. All right, thank you very much. And when we get to the end, Kristen is really your go-to person for anything about design and architecture or funding the structure. And I'm all about where we are now, which is the middle of the lottery application process. So what you have in front of you here is sort of a breakdown of all of these units. How do we get to those 23 units? So you can see how they're divided. The vast majority are senior studio units, but we have 2 different flavors of unit. And I'll spend a little bit of time here to talk about this because this is the most complicated part for everyone. So we have 2 different income levels, 30% AMI and 60% AMI. And I'm not going to do a pop quiz to Don Gross in the back about what AMI stands for. But AMI stands for Area Median Income. So what that says is within our overall geographic region, which is the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy Metropolitan Service Area, that's that line at the top. This is a geographic area defined by HUD, and every year they come out with annual income limits that define each level. So if you're looking at applying for one of these apartments, and let's just say you make $25,000 a year, looking at the chart, you can kind of see where you might be. You're going to be at the income range for 30% of gross income. These are the 30% AMI levels. That's sort of the first tier of income. And regardless of what your income is, you will pay 30% of it towards the rent. So if I make $10,000 a year on Social Security, that's all you have, you will pay 30% of that. If you make $30,000 a year, if you're looking at a 2-person there, you notice the limit's $33,650, you will pay 30% of it, regardless. That's how the 30% units are going to work. But below that, you'll notice there's a range, and those are for the 60% AMI units. So here, what you're looking at is a range of rent that you will pay, and there's a minimum income that we're sort of looking for people to have, and then there's a very firm maximum income. And that number, again, comes straight from HUD. We have no flexibility. So if I apply and I make $58,921, Don Gross back there, Amy Hale, boom, you're out. They're very strict about it. There's no leniency on the upper end. And that's just an unfortunate reality that we have to deal with. So as you're looking through it, you'll see there's 17 total senior units. There are the 2 2-bedroom units, and then the 4 3-bedroom units, all at sort of different flavors of income. So I'm going to pause here actually before going back. Does anybody have a question about how the income range is presented? Such a good question. So up to 120% of your income for the 60% units, I might actually ask Dawn to answer the 30% units. this program is intended to sort of help people stabilize their life situation. So for the low income housing tax credit units, which are the 60% units, you can actually have your income increase up to 120% of the annual maximum and still be eligible for the housing, because we recognize that sometimes you do make more money. Sometimes you get a raise. Like, I want a raise, you want a raise, we all want raises. Every year Social Security goes up, right? For 2023, we're talking about an 8.7% increase. That happens. So there is a range that allows you to scale upward within your eligibility before you become ineligible. The other thing to remember is that HUD increases these limits every year as well. So these are the 2022 year limits. In 2023, in April, they'll release new limits, which are customarily always higher. I don't think they've ever gone down in the history of the universe. Have you ever seen that? No? So that is the range there. I might actually ask my colleague Dawn to answer the question. If you are at a 30% unit, is there any flexibility to go up past 120%, or is it a firm stop? You don't think there's any flexibility? Right. So the 30% units have a firm cap, but you'll notice once you're out of the income eligibility for the 30%, now you're into the 60%, right? There's sort of an upflow from one to the other. So if you're at the bottom end of the eligibility and your income goes up, the worst thing that will happen, it will bump you into the next eligibility group. The only time you would become completely ineligible for the property is if your income exceeds 120% of the maximum allowable. So 140? Oh, see, that's why you're here. 140%. Thank you, Dawn, of the maximum allowable. It's a really good question.
If somebody has an inheritance, somebody dies, you get an inheritance, you get a big chunk of money or something, and it's still the same thing, 120 to 140%.
Nope, not at all, because that doesn't count as income. That's considered an asset. And guess what? There's no income limit on assets. So you can actually have a sizable amount of assets. What we do is impute a very small percentage of it. The federal government allows us to take 0.06%, which, yes, math fans, is 0.0006 times your total asset amount. So in this lottery, I've already seen some applications come through where some seniors have, $500,000 of assets. You have a retirement, you have an annuity, maybe you had a house and you sold a house. It's very, very common. So there's no limit on assets, but we do take just a tiny fraction of the income. But you'd honestly have to have $10 million of savings to have that make a difference on your income, at which point I don't think you'd be applying for the housing. It's a really good question.
So on the 2-bedroom, it's 30% gross income. It says below 33,650 for 2 people. I'm just curious, and then it's on the next one is 60%. It's the minimum is 51.
Right.
I know this is stupid, but what if
we call that being in? I do. Yep. It's a good question. We struggle with this a lot. We sort of call that you're a little bit in the gap, right? You're above the 30% max, but you're below the 60% sort of stated minimum. The reason we're not going to reject anyone from the lottery now is that by and large, most people's income tends to increase. Or if you know that you need to get kind of towards that minimum, people often will end up taking on another job, their income will increase. We're doing a lease up right now for our Anchor Point lottery in Beverly, and it's amazing the number of people who had one number at the lottery and their income has gone up to the point where we've had lots of people actually exceed the maximum eligibility. So we do post the minimum because we want people to be aware of it, but we wouldn't want to reject someone from the lottery at this moment based on that number. But I'll talk about where the number comes from. So I'll wait though. You're making a face, makes me think.
I have a question.
take a total together of $45,000, whatever, $45,000. So where would that fit into the
for two people? So it would be sort of in the gap. So you could be in the lottery, and if your number were drawn, then the property manager during the lease up would say, okay, this is the minimum income that we would hope you make in order to spend no more than 35% of your monthly income on rent. So that's where this number comes from, is we don't want people renting the units if they're going to spend 50% of their income on rent, 60% on rent. That's an unsustainable amount. So typically people talk about housing is supposed to be about 30% of your monthly income. we understand that things are difficult sometimes, so we go up to about 35% of your monthly income. But at that point, it becomes a little bit difficult, right? Let's say you have an unexpected bill, or your car breaks down, or something happens, or maybe you're working, but you get sick and you don't get paid for a month. You know, if you're at that level of your monthly income and something happens, it's very easy to get behind very quickly. So we've set that minimum to coincide with someone spending 35% of their monthly income on rent. That help? Okay. We can come back to this later. Yes?
Be like the size of this or half this school.
Maybe about the size of this room. What do you think, Kristen? No? Half? Oh, by 10. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Roughly 30 by 10, you know, think of it that way. We can ask more questions, and I will be here all night to answer your questions about this part of the process because it's very difficult. So we'll move on to the next bit here. Crucial deadline, March 1st at 4 o'clock, if we're being specific. By March 1st at 4 p.m., if I do not have your completed application and all of your supporting documentation, you will not be in the lottery. If you've mailed it and it's postmarked, that's okay. But if it's not postmarked by March 1st or is not physically in my hot little hands by 4 o'clock, unfortunately, you will not be eligible to participate in the lottery. If you're late, so to speak, you can still go onto the wait list, but you'll go onto the wait list behind everybody else who was in the lottery. So it is imperative to get everything you need in by March 1st. The sooner the better, because there's nothing worse than me getting an email at 4:07. I can't take it. Common sense might say, oh, it's just a little late. But once I do that for one person, then the deadline is 4:07, then it's 5, and then it's 8. We have to have a very firm, draconian deadline of 4 p.m. And I recognize that's harsh.
Capability of by drawing.
Drawing. You're gonna love the next slide when we get to it. I'll talk about that in 1 second. In terms of other deadlines, we're gonna have the actual lottery will take place right here in this room on April 3rd. So you get to come back again. And then from April 4th to roughly the end of June is what we call the lease up. That's when you're going to go through the next round of eligibility. All new paperwork. We'll have to get social security cards, driver's license. Everyone has to go through a criminal background screening, credit check. That's when it gets sort of really serious if you're selected in the lottery. So that will happen from April to June-ish, depending on how quickly Kristen builds this building. And then the goal is that people would be ready for occupancy by next July. That's the timeline that we're hoping to hold, weather permitting, everything notwithstanding. Next July. I realize this box, let's see, can I move this box a little? I'll move it back. July 1st of next year is when we're sort of looking at occupancy. Okay. Could be end of July. Just like everything, we sometimes are also experiencing supply chain delays, especially in construction. So if there's a crucial part that we just can't get, there's only so much that we can do. So that's the goal. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide only because it answers a crucial question of how does this lottery actually work, right? So there's going to be 2 pools. Preston talked about it. There is a local pool, which is limited to people who already live, work, or have children attending public schools in Rockport. This is sort of tied to the public funding side of it. So there's a local pool, and that is where the preference lies. We are limited by state law to a maximum of 70% local preference, but we are also limited by ADA accessibility and sensory needs. So I believe the final number of local preference units for this development is 13, if I remember correctly. That sound right? 13, 1-3. I think it's like 62% or something. I honestly have to do the math again. Is it 55? That's such a good question. So The local preference is desirable for folks who already live in Rockport, but because we have units that are purposely designed for folks with ADA accommodations or sensory accommodations, or those that are receiving subsidies through federal Section 8 project-based vouchers, which is federal money coming in, we're not allowed to apply a local preference to something that is superseded by a federal regulation. So if it's a Section 8 federally subsidized unit, which is some of the units at all the levels, we cannot apply a local preference to those units. Similarly, it's a fair housing violation to provide local preference to anyone who needs an ADA or sensory unit. They have to come from the open pool by law. So once you back out all the Section 8 units and all of the ADA or sensory units, the number we're left with is 13.
We did it. The other thing about that, I mean, we found out at, you know, when we presented at town meeting this fall was, they didn't even know we were giving money, and they didn't know how many would be for Rockporters. There's so many people who live in Rockport who are desperate to stay here, with teachers, all that. I mean, it's people being squeezed out financially by people who are here with a lot of money. So it's not, you know, people who have a house to sell and will still have a stash, and then they want to live in.
Of course, yeah.
Desperate.
Yes, no,
Family member. He was forced to go to Gloucester, and I've had him on both lists. The Gloucester Housing Authority, I still bug him even though, and it goes to homeless and veterans understandably, and homeless understandably, from all over the state and even further. So, you know, everything seems biased to people not around here, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To accommodate those who desperately want to stay here.
Well, that's why, right. And that's why we've actually maxed out, as much as we're legally allowed to do so, applied the local preference within the limits of state and federal law.
Again, in the small print, a select person posted it on local social media. Small print. It'll only be for those allocated for Rockporters or locals, will be only for the first lease. So
That's state law.
after that, so
Yep, that's state law.
most people don't know that. People are very excited about this project for their kids someday. Oh, we need.
Sorry, would you repeat that statement because we didn't hear it?
That only after the first lease, these units that are allocated for Rockport or local.
Right.
After that first lease, say someone passes away in 2 years who was a Rockporter, then that goes into the larger everybody pool. So it's a shame. It really is. I do feel that's bait and switch, because not by you guys at all. I don't mean it at all personally, but people didn't know that. Like, yay, affordable housing has come for us, you know, and for my elderly family. I have a disabled family member who lives in an unsafe place because he's not homeless. I have to pick him on the street to get him out. It would appear that way.
Yeah, well, I want to validate what you're saying, that it's frustrating when you don't know things, but I'll just sort of, and for the folks listening on the Zoom, we're having a sort of conversation about how long the local preference lasts. And yes, the answer is that we are allowed to apply local preference through the initial lease up. But once a unit is officially leased, we have to then draw the long-term wait list from the open pool. So let me walk through the steps here just a little bit. Let me just walk through just a little bit, because I might touch on it. So we have the local pool, and then we have this open pool, which is everyone that was in the local pool plus everybody else. So the local participants actually get drawn twice. This can be very confusing. So when you get drawn, if you're in the local pool, you'll get drawn once for your local number, and then you'll get drawn a second time for the open number. So you actually kind of have two chances, if you think of it that way. And I'm going to walk through the steps here and why we do it. So step number one is, if you're eligible, you'll get a letter from me and we'll have a generic number. So if Kristen was in the lottery and she was number one, we in the lottery would be calling out number one as opposed to someone's name or some other way to identify them. It's completely anonymous. The only people who know who's who is me. I'm the only person. Maybe Kristen, if she asks nicely, I might tell her. But at the time of the lottery, I'm the only person who knows which number relates to which person. So there's anonymity put into it. So you get a lottery number. The first drawing we do, and it's literally with a glass bowl. It's like the Powerball, but not quite as exciting. We have a glass bowl and we will shake it up repeatedly and we'll literally draw the number out and call it out. And we'll be recording it. We'll have it Zoom recorded. We have 2 people taking notes. And at the end of it, we cross-check the numbers to make sure we're right. So there's a lot of redundancy. So we literally draw the local numbers once, and then we'll do it all over again and draw the open numbers. And that is all that will happen during the lottery. That moment is literally a drawing of little pieces of paper. Then we go back to the office, and over the next couple of days, we sort everyone and say, all right, who were the top, 4 people here, the top 13 people here, who had an ADA preference, et cetera, et cetera. And everyone gets ranked in that order based on their local or open draw number. Then we start calling people and say, congratulations, you have been awarded a unit in the lottery. Would you like to continue? And then that's when we'll start that lease up process. When we get to the end of the lease up, and this sort of goes to your question, let's say this building is fully leased on July 30th, 2023, we are ready to go. At that moment, local preference fades away and the long-term wait list is only drawn from the open pool. And that's a fair housing regulation, and we do not have any flexibility around that. And then we'll maintain that wait list in perpetuity. This is why it's really important to get into the lottery too. And this point, I really want to underscore to folks. So let's say we have 500 people who get into the lottery. And on March 2nd at 9 a.m., I get a perfect application. Just someone who's local, who is homeless, who needs an ADA unit, who has kids in the public schools, right? A unicorn of an applicant, someone who clicks all the boxes. If it arrives after the lottery and we already have 500 people in the lottery, they are automatically number 501, no matter what it says. So it's really important to get into the lottery because that's your long-term wait list, and that list will continue to grow. So from the time the lottery closes, moving forward into the future, everyone who applies after, even if their application just looks phenomenal, it won't matter because they've already missed the lottery deadline. Does that make sense? Okay, now I'm going to pause again for more questions. In terms of the number of local preference. Ooh, I don't remember off the top of my head. I can look it up.
If the 6 houses are at that 60%. And the last one is
Yeah, that's what I'm going to tell you. I'm looking it up right now. There's even more of a complicated chart, if you could believe it. So to your question, of the senior studio units, there are 17 total. And of those 17, 9 of them are going to be designated as local preference. So 9 of 17 for the senior units. Of the 2-bedroom units, 1 of them is designated for local preference. So 1 of 2 for the 2-bedroom. And of the 4-bedroom units, the 3-bedroom units, there are 4 of them, 3 of them have local preference. Does that make sense? So 9 for the seniors, 1 for the 2 bedrooms, 3 for the 3 bedrooms. Anybody from across, anybody, California, anywhere, open pool. Mhm.
But it is.
Right.
It's federally funded. A lot of what we have to do is driven by our funding source. Projects, multiple millions of dollars, build, develop, and which, local funding from the town is a part of it, but there's state funding, there's regional funding, and there's a lot of federal funding. So all of those, anyone who's putting money into it, right? Any organization that's helping us build this house is going to have their own thoughts about who gets to live there, what's fair, so there's a whole bunch of different priorities that we have to sort through to satisfy all centers. It's probably about 5%.
So for folks on the Zoom, we're just talking about, I think that you're able to hear because I can see it on the transcription. We're just talking about the funding sources and how it translates to preference. So yes, ma'am.
Make that local lottery and you go into open lottery. Say you don't make that one, can you stay on the waiting list?
That is where the waiting list comes from. Yes, 100%. So when we start making those calls after the lottery, what happens is, let's say someone applies now, and by the time you actually get to the point of calling them to say, are you ready to move? Maybe they've signed a new lease. Maybe they don't want to move. Maybe there's jobs changed. Maybe they're over income. Maybe they're under income. Maybe they got divorced. Maybe they had a baby. Who knows what could happen between now and next June. And so this is a very common thing. And sometimes people just decide, you know what? I don't want to move to Rockport, or I don't want to live in 355 square feet, or whatever it may be, you know, anything could happen. So what will happen if you're in the lottery and you're not given one of the initial, 23 units, the lottery participants will be the first part of the wait list, and we'll just start calling our way through. And the worst thing that happens is you say, you know what, I'm not ready. Could you put me on the longer term wait list? And what we do is we just put you then back behind the lottery application. So the worst thing that happens is you pass it by and say, I'm not ready. I don't want it.
So once you choose all of the units
Mhm.
and the law closed, and you're in the open, on the open list,
Mhm.
what determines your placing, your position on the open list?
Wherever you were drawn in the open pool lottery draw. So when your number from the open pool is the number that will live with you until your time comes up, right? So let's say I'm number 337. That was my open pool draw number. That will forevermore be where I am, because once the lottery happens, it happens. We're not going to do it again. So your place is fixed in time. No one will get ahead of you, and you will not fall farther down unless we call you at number 337 and you say, I'm going to take a pass. Put me at the bottom. Then you would fall below, but only after you'd had your chance at a unit.
If you're right list and say you get called and say you're offered a unit, you're only, some places only allow you to refuse, like, say twice. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Before you're taken off the wait list.
Right. Right. So in this case, especially an initial lease up, I think we've been taking people, and you'll get your first initial call, and then you go to the bottom of the list, and you get another call, and then that would essentially be 2. And then I think at that point, we'd probably be 5 years post lease up. So I think in reality, as a practical matter, but what you're saying is essentially true. There's only so many times you can sort of hold your place at the top of the line before we're gonna move on. It depends. Yep. So it depends on their student status. So typically a full-time student, even if they're not permanently in the home, they're there, they're still counted as a member of the household. So that's sort of designed with that intentionally. So you're still a member of your household, even if you're a full-time student, even if you're away at school. They're included in the household income calculation, and they're included as a member of the household.
What happens? And the parents are still there, or one parent?
Yep. So we'd have to look at the total household composition at that point, and state law sort of prevents us from overhousing or underhousing people. This is actually a really good question for some of the seniors who are concerned about space. Legally, we're not allowed to give people extra bedrooms, right? So let's say you came in as a 3-bedroom with a couple and 2 kids. And in your scenario, eventually one of those kids graduates, they move on. Now you are a married couple and 1 child, and that's it. Technically, at that point, you would be considered overhoused for a 3-bedroom apartment, because in order to sleep, you really only need 2 bedrooms. The state does not allow us to provide affordable housing so someone can have a den or a library or an exercise room or whatever you might see in the open market. We're just not allowed to do that. So we'd have to, at the time of their next annual recertification, the property manager would look through, and their household eligibility would no longer match the unit size. And so they would be given a short-term, you would essentially being asked to move. It wouldn't happen overnight, but you would be given, essentially, I don't want to use the word eviction because that sounds really harsh, but we're not allowed to provide extra housing if you don't need all the bedrooms.
sold their house. They
Mhm.
got Rockport, get a mill. And they would still qualify. But if they go off down south for the winter or anything, do they still qualify for this?
The only way
Are
that,
they still in the same comparison as someone who's desperate for home?
no, you're not allowed to qualify if you own another residence. This has to be your sole and primary. This has to be their primary residence where they live, you know, this has to be where they live. If this is their residence domicile, this is where they are. It's not meant for sunbirds.
And that is. Is there a minimal requirement of the number of months they must stay? Just 2
Two.
months. So they could stay in July and August in Rockport and rent somewhere with all their money. I'm just theoretical, but it's not far-fetched in Rockport. Anyone could sell their house now and get close to $1 million. And then downsize and then go to.
Well, if they wouldn't be able to own another residence, though. I suppose you're saying they'd have to be renting.
They could rent a place for
Right.
winter if they wanted to.
Yeah. So,
Right.
no, I'm having a hard time with putting that person in low income or even affordable housing when we have desperate people here.
It's an interesting question. To be honest, I've never encountered that scenario. I think we'd have to take it on a case by case basis. It's unusual in terms of the demographic of folks that have applied. Yeah.
I know that people in the high school who would winter somewhere else. Arizona, somewhere, and I think there are limits. Right?
I think Don was saying in order, you have to maintain residency for 2 months.
I was at Rockport.
So you're saying,
I never, you know, honestly, I've never had any, you know.
You're saying that they have
Stretch, that you can be gone.
is 60 days. Yeah, that not, so yeah, this is a good clarification. So we're getting, again, our expert pundit in the back of the room, Don Gross, is here with us tonight, who knows Rockport better than anyone. You can only be gone from your residence for 60 days. That's not that you have to live there for 60 days. You can only be gone for 60 days in a calendar year.
But still a lot more money.
Do we have any questions? Do we have any other questions in the room or on the Zoom? There is no asset limit. Again, we compute assets at 0.06% of the total asset value. Oh, yes. The parking wars are real. So everyone does have a dedicated assigned parking spot.
The youth in the high school, and I think you have Curtis Street also.
Pigeon Cove, yep.
They are size to be.
I think those are larger. Again, Dawn, do you mind answering that question? What's the square footage of Pigeon Cove and Rockport High School?
We have some that 400. So they are. I mean, you might have, you know, 10 at one size, 10 at another.
So,
That's strong.
so,
That's right. The sign.
yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
Or above the whole of the.
Right. This is. So that's why we have, to some degree, a little bit of discretion on the lower limit of it. It's based on us sort of saying what's a reasonable amount of money someone would spend every month in their income without being, you know, sort of overcommitted to their rent. We have set that target to be 35%, and which is where the number comes from. We have, to some degree, some flexibility, but usually not very much below this. Because then we again starting to get into fair housing issues. If you accommodate one person who's a little under, now you have another person who's a little under, becomes a very, you know, slippery slope for us to do that. Because if we give it to one person and not to another, now we've created a discriminatory effect. So the minimum is what we're stating to be 35%, so that people are not overburdened. The maximum is set by HUD, which is, again, I mean, I could get a tattoo of those numbers year to year and they would not change. So
And most recent date.
like a most current balance statement. So if it's a quarterly statement or a monthly statement, whatever the most, right? And when you submit the statements, we need the entire statement, not just sort of a summary sheet. Sometimes people give us the summary that has the statement. We actually look at the entire month of transactions.
I have a question.
Okay, question on the Zoom.
Oh, so if assets aren't counted, how come we have to submit bank statements and IRA statements and investment statements?
It's not that they're not counted. Yeah, the question is if assets, she said the question is if assets aren't counted, why do we submit statements? And my answer is it's not that they're not counted, it's that there's not a limit on assets. We still look at them and compute
Oh,
the 0.06% percentage of that for the
Okay.
asset statements. For income, what we're really looking to see is that the paperwork matches your application. So someone often, this happens a lot. People will say that they only get Social Security and maybe they've omitted a monthly pension fund, or sometimes you see unusual transactions, right? We see it especially if people are working another job, they're getting paid in cash. And if we can see this sort of pattern of unusual activity, we'll say, well, you're reporting, $20,000 of income, but every month there's this $1,200 deposit. Where is that coming from? What is that income coming from? So we
okay.
sort of do it to make sure that the application
Right.
is substantiated with your actual bank statements.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Hold on just 1 second. I just want to make sure. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Season only,
Yep.
and that probably fluctuates from year to year, you know what I'm saying? As they get older, I'm sure they do less and less. What do you need in terms of that, just?
Mhm. No, I'll actually, it's actually in the application itself on the front cover sheet. If you're looking at it, it talks about seasonal work. Let's see here. 6 months. So if you're working, it's the 5 most, like full-time employment is the 5 most current pay stubs. But if you look at the third line down, it's 6 months of income documentation for hourly and seasonal workers. Yep. I know.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, you're welcome. The other thing too, to remember, and I'm glad that I'm here as a human, I'm not a robot. If you're concerned, just call me, I call, we look at it, and there's often a story that explains things, right? And as long as what you're saying makes sense with what we're seeing and it's plausible, we're not giving a polygraph to anyone. You're signing under penalty of perjury that what you say is true, right? And you're providing the documentation, but it's not like you're submitting your application to a robot, right? Like I'm an actual person who will look at it. And oftentimes people will write a note to explain their situation. And in some cases, we have people who don't have bank accounts. There's one person in the lottery who had their identity stolen and actually does not have a bank account and sends money to another person who then gives them cash, which, my gosh, that looks really fishy to me, right? That looks very suspicious. But when you look at the overall statement and you look at how it's transacted, we're doing our very best to do due diligence, but we understand that sometimes things happen and it doesn't always make a perfectly clear paper line. We need it to be as clear as possible. And for federal compliance, when Dawn and Amy are doing their HUD scrutiny and their recertifications, we have to be able to produce a piece of paper that explains everything. But we also understand that sometimes people's financial situations can be really tricky based on their life circumstances, especially with money moving now with Zelle and Venmo. And, sometimes people don't even have a regular bank account, right? So you're going to talk to me. You're not going to talk to a robot, which is helpful.
Yeah, and I'll say, so one of our major sources of funding comes through the IRS. So
Mhm.
you can imagine how much fun that compliance is for us. So that's part of why we do such detail, right, in the applications. But I've seen Anna and her team
you know, they will work as hard as they can to help people qualify, help them figure out what pieces of paperwork they need, help. They're tremendous. So we want applications, we want people to participate, and we want to help as much as we can.
Any other questions? No, you just need to be a current resident or currently working at the time that you submit your application, or currently have a child in the public school system. Unfortunately, if you've lived here a really long time, but then you moved away for some reason, we cannot retroactively give credit for, 40 years of residency. It has to be current at the time of the application. You could. If you move in January and submit before March and you have a valid Rockport address, which is again substantiated by a mailing address or a bank account or a lease or a utility bill, something like that, that's fine. All right, I'll go into my very last slide, which is just a little bit more information about where to get an application. We have some over here, although I see the pile is gone, which is very encouraging. You can also get one on our website. You can email applications and we will send one to you, or you could get one in person. The library had a pile, they might have run out, but it can give them more. Also at Town Hall, or you can stop by our office and pick one up in person. It's 283 Elliott Street in Beverly, if you want to pick one up in person. And the contact information you see there is me. I'm Anna, the lottery agent. And if I don't know the answer, I will immediately defer to my more knowledgeable, more helpful colleagues like Kristen and Dawn, et cetera, because we really want to get it right. I think what Kristen said is important, is that we're doing our best to follow all of the legal requirements we must. We have no discretion, but Harbor Light is a real company of people that care. We are not a for-profit developer. We do not see this as a factory widget situation, right? Like, we are building housing for people who desperately need housing because we want to. And I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but if we were in this to make a ton of money and have a ton of power, I would not be an affordable housing lottery agent. That would not have been my chosen life pursuit. I don't think that Dawn would be doing this or Kristen would be doing this. So we truly value what we're providing to our communities in the North Shore, and we're not out to get anyone. That's the other thing too. I'll say this explicitly. A lot of people approach housing as sort of a punishment, right? Like, they're looking for a reason to reject you. Well, let's look at this. And, it doesn't match. Boom, they're out. I'm the opposite. I'm looking for a way to put you in the lottery. I'm trying to get you in the housing as opposed to kick you out of the housing. It's a very different mindset. So I think that's really important to say that explicitly. Mm-hmm. Do we have any other questions on the Zoom? It's awful quiet on the Zoom. I'm just going to check the chat over here. Looks like we have a direct question from somebody in the Zoom to me. Let's see here. It's difficult for me to answer personal questions on a publicly recorded Zoom. What I might say to folks in the Zoom who have a little bit more personal question is to send me an email or give me a call tomorrow, so I don't talk about it too much.
Sound, air separation.
Okay.
It's helpful.
Do you want to come closer to the?
Yeah. So
back to the podium?
I saw there was a question about how are the units insulated against sound or against air circulation from one unit to the next.
What'd you
Sorry?
say?
And
Oh,
between
right, yeah.
floors. Yeah. So so this building it has to pass what's called a HERS rating. And that's where they do, it's called a blower door test. So they test each unit to make sure that the air that they blow into the unit stays within that unit and isn't leaking out into other units.
Mm-hmm.
So from a construction perspective, they're doing the framing before they put up the drywall. They're sealing all the edges of each apartment, right? So that's for health reasons. That's for, you might not want to smell what your neighbor's cooking for dinner.
Or you might some days, depending on what it is.
Right, but you won't be able to. So each apartment has its own heating and cooling. So that's just internal to that unit. And all of the sound separation, we pay special attention. There's basic sound separation between units and also between floors, with acoustically specified assemblies. And then we pay special attention to an apartment that might be next to, say, the community room or the laundry room, and that gets extra acoustic reinforcement to try and keep, I mean, it's a building, you'll hear things, but it is designed with a lot of separation.
Come here. Come on,
Even
kitten.
how concrete floors,
Come on.
in between, so that, people below aren't gonna get people walking around or back.
Come here, kitten.
So it's the floors are, so the ground floor is concrete and then with flooring over it. The second floor is a wood frame with a sound mat and then flooring over that.
So is the air gonna be forced hot air?
Nope, they are, it's like a mini split system. It's a heat
Mhm.
pump. It's all electric, high efficiency. And that there'll be one in each apartment. Each home will have its own heat pump. And that will generate both cool air conditioning and heat. And it's supplied by pipes. So there's pipes that are shared. But there's no ductwork
So
that's shared.
like some of the units like condos at Pondview Village or the ones on Main Street in the Browns Mall. They have forced hot air systems, individual thermostats in the individual
Yeah.
units.
Yeah,
But
this is
when
different.
someone's burning
Mhm.
smoke,
Yep.
toast, you could smell
This
it.
is different. So there's there's like this little heat pump unit, little mechanical
Absolutely.
unit,
Mhm.
and then there's ducts just within the unit itself. Right? So it's just all,
And they're typically,
and then there's air that's exhausted and fresh air brought in it. But that's, yeah.
yes.
So is it a kind of a smoke-free?
Oh, yes.
housing campus?
Yes.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
So
Yep.
Even if the adult children are living there, like no smoking. no
Correct.
Of any kind.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I'm glad that you asked. Our policy is no pets. However, we are legally required and we allow emotional support animals or service animals. So there's a difference legally between a pet, a service animal, or an emotional support animal. 3 different kinds of things. No pets is the policy, but if someone has a medically documented need for a service animal or an emotional support animal, we are, happy to have those animals. Usually service animals, I believe, are restricted to dogs and miniature horses, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
Does that sound right? Again, Don Gross, your mic. I think that's what it is. I think so. Strictly speaking, if you're asking for a service animal exemption, it's either a dog or a miniature horse. Not making it up. Google it. It's for real.
Yep. I do consider stackable, betless washer dryer. I mean, I think it's senior. How many washers and dryers will be on each floor?
That's a good question. So the question is, did we consider stackable units and how many washers and dryers in each floor? And again, I'm going to defer to Kristen here, the
Yeah.
construction expert.
Yeah. So what we typically do and what the funding sources will support is shared laundry. So putting the laundry in each unit would have been it's a lot more expensive. And it also takes up space, right? So then that bites into some of the floor space. Each floor, so there's 2 floors. Each floor has a laundry room. Each laundry room has 2 washers and 2 dryers.
Any other questions? No? Any other questions on the Zoom before I turn it off? We will continue to be here to answer questions. You don't have to leave right now, but for those folks listening on Zoom, I'm going to go ahead and end this recording now. But you have my contact information. Always feel free to find it. So I'm going to end the Zoom. And for those of us in the room, we're going to stay here and answer more questions. So
Thank you very much.
you.
You're
Very
welcome.
helpful.
you.